Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let's say thank to Allah who has given us mercies and blessings. And also, don't forget to deliver salawat and salam to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who has brought us from the darkness to the brightness era. So, we are from the group 8, and we will present the material about bilingualism, cognition, transfer, and learning strategies. I'm Yulia Putri Utami as the first speaker, and my partner Masita Adawiya as the second speaker, and the third speaker is Audi Agustina. Okay, I will explain about varieties of bilingualism and is bilingualism beneficial or detrimental? Bilingual is the uh, person who has use of two languages or two language codes. According to Wenreich, bilingualism is the practice of using two languages interchangeably. Example of bilingualism is when someone is in Indonesian society, they will use Indonesian, and when in English society, they will use English. So if a person masters two languages, it's called bilingualism. Okay, the first is varieties of bilingualism. Having the ability to bilingualism does not only apply to people who can speak orally using two languages, but there are also varieties of sign languages. For example, the use of English Sign Language and Indonesian Sign Language. Many deaf people are such bilingualism. In addition, there are also bilinguals who can read and write a second language fluently, but cannot speak or understand the spoken English. Uh, and this is called learning a language in writing mode. So we can say that a person is bilingual if they knows he knows or she knows the first is two languages in the same modality. For example, they can speak English orally and can also speak Indonesian orally, or can speak English sign and can speak Indonesian sign language. The second, two languages in different modalities. For example, they can speak spoken English and can speak Indonesian sign language. Um, the second is bilingualism beneficial or detrimental? It's no secret that there are many benefits to being bilingual, such as being able to communicate with foreigners, being able to visit other countries without fear of language barriers, being able to watch movies without subtitles, and many other benefits. But from the many benefits of bilingualism, have we ever imagined this disadvantage of having bilingual abilities? Um, the first is some of dangers of learning a second language at an early age. For example, learning a second language will hinder the learning of mother tongue and hinder the development of thinking and cognitive capacities such as mathematics and reading. The second is it is feared that the person will become obsessed with the country and forget the culture and ethic city of the country itself. I think okay. I think that's all from me. So I will invite the second speakers is Masjid Adawiyah. Masjid Adawiyah, time is yours.
Okay, my name is Mashita Dawia, and now I want to continue the explanation by my friend Yulia, and now I want to explain about effects on first language development. So, can learning a second language at an early age while the child is still in the process of learning the native or first language have a negative effect on the learning of the native language? There is the concern that bilingualism might somehow retard first or even second language development, with the result that, for example, a child raised with two languages might never really learn either language as well as world monolingual speakers of those languages. This is an empirical question and one to which researchers have addressed themselves. So, negative reports. One well-known and influential piece of research for its time was that of Smith back in 1930. Gathered comparative data on the language of preschool children in Loa, where she did her graduate work, and on children in Hawaii, where she went to teach. The Loa children were essentially white and monolingually English, while the Hawaii children were ethnically diverse of Chinese, Filipino, Hawaiian, Japanese, Korean, and Portuguese parentage, and bilingual, with English as one of their language. Smith recorded sentences uttered by the children and evaluated the sentences in terms of standard English usage. The principal finding was that the bilingual children from Hawaii had many more errors in their language English speech counterparts. This led Smith to conclude that bilingualism caused retardation in language development. However, by defining English error the way she did, Smith couldn't help but come up with the results that she did. Children in Hawaii in general spoke a dialect of English that was prevalent there, so-called Pidgin, and was not the standard English spoken by the children from Lua. The Hawaiian children were penalized. Smith's bias is reminiscent of the later work of researchers such as Berreter and Engelmann and Basil Bernstein in the 1980s. Non-standard speakers of English, in particular, inner city African Americans in the USA and working class whites in Britain, had poor language knowledge compared to standard English speakers. The brilliant work of Labov and other linguistic researchers in the 1960s and 1970s, however, conclusively demonstrated that non-standard dialects of English are very bit as complex as standard dialects, as typified by Midwest in America, for example, and are linguistically comparable. The positive reports. More sophisticated investigations comparing the linguistic skills of monolinguals and bilinguals have been made by Lambert and his associates in Canada. One long-term study by Brooke et al. With native English-speaking children in a French immersion program found that by the fourth or fifth grade, the second language French skills including reading and writing, were almost as good as those of native French-speaking children. Importantly, all of this was achieved at no loss to their English native language development as compared to a control group of English monolingual children. In addition, the immersion group did better than the English monolingual group on creativity tests. In many cases, their mathematics and science scores were also higher. Positive effects with very different languages. The studies reviewed above discussed bilingualism in terms of two similar languages, English and French. What about the effects of bilingualism in terms of two languages that are quite different? For example, English and Japanese not only have completely different syntactic structures, but they also have completely different writing systems. Regarding syntax, for example, Japanese uses a subject, object, verb, ordering and uses a system of postposition particles that follow nouns and noun phrases. It also differs from English in that English is a right branching language where relative clauses follow the noun, the modified. Example, the dog which Mary brought was a happy dog. While Japanese is a left branching language where modifying clauses precede the noun. Regarding the writing systems, while English use a relative simple Roman type of alphabet, Japanese writing is complex, using Chinese characters along with two different syllabaries, or a syllabary being a system in which each sign represents a syllable. And then effects on intelligence. Those learning a second language at an early age, while the child is still in the process of acquiring some aspects of the native or first language, have a positive or negative effects on the child's intelligence, thinking ability, creativity, or cognitive functions such as mathematics, as was the case in considering effects on the development of language. Most early research tended to find a negative effect. The possibility that learning a second language could in some way have a positive effect on intelligence was not something that was considered tenable until relatively recently. Negative reports. Perhaps the earliest study on bilingualism intelligence was done in America. Goddard gave the English language version of the Binet intelligence test to 30 recently arrived adult immigrants at Ellis Island. On the word fluency portion of the test, it was found that less than half of adult immigrants could provide 60 words and figure much below the 200 words that 11-year-old American children could provide. Goddard classified 25 feeble-minded. Similar results were found in comparison of monolinguals and bilinguals in Wales. Sayer tested the intelligence of children between ages of 7 and 14 based on the higher scores of monolinguals on IQ tests. He concluded that bilinguals' thinking processes were confused by the use of two languages. What is wrong with this and other similar studies is the fact that knowledge of the target language itself plays a great role in determining the outcome of scores on the intelligence test. Since language is crucial in order to comprehend questions and to understand the multiple choice answer, a low level language knowledge will result in a low score and hence a low level of intelligence. Positive reports. It was only in the 1950s that psychologists seriously began to realize that test items that require knowing language was not a fair measure of intelligence and that the content of items in many widely used intelligence tests was culturally biased. Once the methodological errors began to be taken into one of the first studies to find positive effects on intelligence for bilingualism was that of Pill and Lambert. They conclude that bilingualism results in greater mental flexibility and abstract thought. Furthermore, they suggested that rather than the two languages causing confused thinking, bilingualism improved thinking. This idea is supported by an impressive amount of recent study. If children have more than one language to analyze, they pay more attention to structural patterns and functions of words, which in turn has a crucial effect on further reading and academic success. It is unlikely that learning a second language negatively affects intelligence in a permanent or important way. In fact, some research suggests there may even be beneficial effects, given the advantages of knowing another language and of young children's propensity for speedy language acquisition. There is good reason to favor early bilingualism. And then the second is sequential and simultaneous learning situations. Um, Sequential learning of two languages. The first is consider, for example, an immigrant couple who have come to America from China with their 4-year-old daughter. They sent their daughter to an English-speaking preschool, but they continue to speak only Chinese at home. By the time the child is 5 years old, she is speaking fluent English with her playmates and teachers while continuing to speak Chinese at home with her parents. Her English is as good as the English of her friends. The child has thus learned two languages, Chinese and English, sequentially, with the second language being introduced after a great deal of the first language had been learned. Although the child begins learning English, Chinese continues to be learned from her parents at home. From this point on, the advanced learning of the two languages will be occurring simultaneously. What is sequential in the different starting time with a 4-year gap before the introduction of the second language? Simultaneous learning, one person speaks one language only, or one person speaks two languages. There are two basic situations in which a child may learn two or more languages at the same time. The first, each person speaks one language only to the child, one person, one language. Or the second, each person speaks two different languages to the child, one person, two languages. And then, first language similar to second language. Facilitation occurs even between very different languages. It is clear that the knowledge of a prior language will help the learning of a second language, even when the two languages are quite different with respect to vocabulary, syntax, and pronunciation. The fact that 5-year-old child in a foreign environment, a New York child moving to Tokyo, can often learn a second language in less than a year, which is much faster than the child's learning of its first language, strongly suggests that there is some sort of commonality along languages that is separate from the usual similarity measures that are used in comparing languages. Such commonalities, which all languages share, would consist of such principles as words have a morpheme structure and a phoneme structure, words combine into phrases and into sentences and clauses, basic constituents must be ordered in some way, and such operations as substitution, deletion, and addition are involved. The knowledge that words and sentences represent objects, ideas, situations, and events, for example, is something that the first language learner brings to the second language situation and does not have to struggle to relearn. What one's first language is will affect one's learning of the second language. Thus, not every second language will be learned at the same rate. The nature of the similarity relationship between the first and the second languages will determine the rate of learning. For example, after having learned English as a first language, learning French would not be as difficult as would learning Japanese. There are differences between English and French syntax, but these differences are small in comparison to the monumental differences between syntax of English and Japanese. To the extent that two languages have similarities, such as the position of article, as in English and French, gender designation of nouns as masculine or feminine, as in French and Italian, and then obligatory marking of nouns for plurality and similar syntactic structures, as in English and French. There will be a greater facilitation. There is that much less for the second language learner to learn. The higher the similarity, the faster the learning. There can be significant similarities in terms of vocabulary as well. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you so much for your attention. And now the explanation will be continued by my friend Aulia Agustina.
Well, I'm Aulia Agustina. I will continue the explanation from my friends in our groups. And I will explain about strategies for second language production and teaching reading in a bilingual situation at home. So the first is strategies for second language production. In this strategies for second language production, there are three important points. The first is the first language strategy and the second language strategy. Because errors are easy to observe and are good indicator of a person's level of second language knowledge, there have been many good studies done on error. See Corder's 1981 for a review. There is some confusion, though, when it comes to interpreting just what the cause of errors might be. In our opinion, only a minority of errors can be attributed to interference where the first language intrudes on the second. Rather, most errors are systematic, being the result of the application of what we shall call the first language strategy and second language strategy. The strategies are applied when relevant second language knowledge is not yet available or is incomplete. And supposing that the English speaking person didn't know the Japanese rule, then this could well be an instance not of interference, but of the result of using the first language strategy, that is, applying first language knowledge to the second language. When second language knowledge is lacking, this strategy is very useful. It's not that it is one that we believe all second language learners automatically use and rely on, especially in conversation. Usually, it is better to say something, even if wrong, than to say nothing. The strategy will allow for something to be said, even though it is based on knowledge of the first language. And the second point is strategies for sentence production and communication. Strategies that are used for the purpose of keeping the conversation going involve communication strategies. Firch and Casper, 1983. Casper and Kellerman, 1997. Communication strategies might have an effect on learning since the more the learner speaks, the greater linguistic input the learner will receive. The greater the input, the more the opportunity for language learning. This type of strategy includes overgeneralization, in which a rule of the second language is applied in appropriate contexts, such as the definite article being used with dinner In the example above, communication strategies may also involve using words or phrase from the first language when they are unknown in the second language, code switching, or coining new words such as airball for balloon, Faraday 1983. And the third point is strategies for becoming a better second language learner. Learning strategies which will assist in the acquisition of second language is a different topic from the one just discussed. The topic previously under discussion mainly concerned using strategies for improving and maintaining communication and conversation. What strategies a person might develop so as to improve the language of a second language is another topic. Researchers such as Rubin 1981, Wenden and Rubin 1987, Cohen 1998, O'Malley and Chamot 1990, and Oxford 1990 1996 are involved in such issues. Thus, for example, according to Rubin 1981, the strategies used by usable language learners include 1. Verification, checking to see if their hypotheses about the language are correct. The second, inductive processing, creating hypotheses about the second language based on one's second or first language knowledge. The third is deductive reasoning, using general logic in problem solving. The fourth is practice, such as repetition, rehearsal, and imitation. The fifth is memorization, including mnemonic strategies and repetition for the purpose of storage and retrieval. And the sixth is monitoring, being alert to the making of efforts and paying attention to how one's message is received by the listener. While one could argue that these are strategies that any language learners naturally use, research indicates that the explicit teaching of such strategies will improve the capacity of the learner. See Cohen, 1998, for a review of the phenomenon. Then the second thing or important thing that I will explain in this session is teaching reading in a bilingual situation at home. The first point is how to teach the reading of two language. So to teach the reading of two language, first is the parents should be using the one person, one language approach, which was discussed earlier in this chapter. In this approach, each parent speaks one language only to the child. For example, the mother speaks Chinese and the father speaks English, and the child learns both language as speech simultaneously. As for teaching reading, however, we recommended that the teaching be done sequentially, with the second language following the first after a year or two. Suppose that the parents start teaching the child to read English. At least one parent must be involved, that the one who speaks English to the child. It will be beneficial if the other parents joined in too, but just for reading and not for language teaching. After about a year or so, by which time English reading is established in the child, then the teaching of Chinese will be started. The lead teacher should be the parent who speaks Chinese to the child. And the second is, which language should be read first? We will recommend it that the language to be learned first is the one that is more important for the child's welfare. Basically, it should be the language that is used in the community and in school. By learning to read the language of the community, the child will be able to read the signs that are everywhere outside the home. This will reinforce the child's learning at home and motivate the child to read more. The second language will not be hard to teach to read after the first because once the child can read the first language, he or she will have learned the basic principles of reading. These principles will make the learning of second language reading easier. So maybe that's all the explanation from me and also from my friends in our group. Thanks for your attention and I hope this explanation can be benefit for us. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.